Jacqueline Garcia Torres, Abilene Christian University. Her speech is "The Lone Star to the Stars: How Texans Led the Race to Space."
Imagine it, a peaceful night sky. Americans asleep, unaware that history was about to change. Then, beep, beep, beep. A cold metallic heartbeat echoes through the sky. Sputnik was in orbit. October 4th, 1957 was more than just a date. It was a challenge, a test of American resolve. Texas was eager and ready to answer the call. From Spanish explorers under our first flag, to forging our republic, to the U.S. flag, our state didn't just grow, it led. It became an industrial and economic powerhouse, a place where imagination met innovation, a state that turned oil fields into launch pads and wild ambition into scientific achievement. Together, we'll explore how the Johnson Space Center made Texas its home and the key individuals whose contributions were critical in keeping the United States competitive in the space race. It was here, in the heart of Texas, that America found the courage to break the bonds of Earth and step boldly into space. Because that is what Texans do. We don't watch history, we make it. NASA's Space Task Group had one clear mission: put an American on the moon before the Soviets. This was a race between superpowers, with the winner gaining a military and strategic advantage in a world armed with nuclear weapons. Losing was not an option. In July 1961, NASA Administrator James E. Webb appointed a team to find the home of the new Space Center. An article on NASA's website clearly states the list of things they needed: barge transportation in ice-free waters, a mild climate, all-weather commercial jet service, a nearby Department of Defense airbase, a nearby university, at least 1,000 acres of land, and property that could be acquired at a reasonable cost. Simple, right? If you've ever driven through downtown Houston or its suburbs, you may wonder how they could even find one vacant acre, let alone 1,000. Yet a series of strategic deals, political connections, and a little Texas-sized ambition made it happen. But the land that the Johnson Space Center sits on has a history of its own, one that began long before NASA arrived. In 1905, businessman James Marion West arrived in Texas and quickly built a fortune that encompassed a 30,000-acre ranch on the land that now houses the Johnson Space Center. In 1938, West sold the land to Humboldt Oil. Enter George Brown, chairman of the Rice University's Board of Regents, a powerful businessman and a close ally of Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson. Brown was determined to bring NASA to Houston and was willing to donate 1,000 acres of land to make it happen. With the help of powerful Texans and the influence of Vice President Johnson, Houston emerged victorious. In September 1961, Houston was announced as the home of the new Manned Spacecraft Center, a $60 million facility that would house mission control, which would eventually give us the line, "Houston, we have a problem." The United States had finally made it to the starting line for the race that would take us to the stars. In 1963, the Manned Spacecraft Center officially opened, marking a new chapter in America's pursuit of space exploration. This was the time for space conquistadors who were ready to reach for the stars. One of the first major milestones for Houston's mission control came with the launch of the Gemini 4 in June 1965. Time magazine paints us a picture of the first American spacewalk, performed by San Antonio native Ed White. After floating freely in space for approximately 20 minutes, White was asked a second time to return to the spacecraft. Upon his return, White said that returning to the craft was, quote, "the saddest day of my life." Ironic, considering what came next. Upon returning to the spacecraft, the hatch initially failed to close, a malfunction that would have been fatal during re-entry. Fortunately, his co-pilot James McDivitt managed to secure it just in time, allowing for both astronauts to return safely to Earth. White and McDivitt circled the Earth 66 times, coming just 1 day short of the Soviet Union's previous record. Every step of the way, it seemed the Soviets were still ahead. On January 27, 1957, tragedy struck during a pre-flight test for Apollo 1. Gus Grissom, Roger Chaffee, and Ed White were killed in a cabin fire. This devastating loss sent shockwaves through our nation, forcing many to ask, was the space race worth it? The National Air and Space Museum quotes Gus Grissom to answer that particular question. He said, quote, "We are in a risky business, and we hope that if anything happens to us, it will not delay the program. The conquest of space is worth the risk." Ed White never made it to space a second time, but he and the rest of the Apollo 1 crew are heroes who helped pave the way for the U.S. to reach the moon. Houston could not afford another loss. Making space travel safer wasn't just a goal, it was a necessity. This was a task for the brightest, the boldest, and the most determined, and among them was a woman whose calculations would change the course of history. Dorothy Lee had dreamed of the stars since childhood. Rocket STEM magazine states that she had a nickname as the human computer with a calculator. As a project engineer, her theoretical predictions about heat shield technology remain a critical component for space reentry, making space travel safer. As the race for dominance continued, with the United States and the Soviet Union neck and neck, all eyes were on Apollo 11 and its final push to the moon. With everyone watching the historic moon landing, there was one person focused on what couldn't be seen. Long blonde hair and a miniskirt weren't the typical uniforms at the Manned Spacecraft Center in 1965. But Frances Poppy Northcutt wasn't there to fit in, she was there to make history. At just 22 years old, the University of Texas graduate arrived with a degree in mathematics, ready to contribute to the space program. Her job title, computeress. Despite holding the same degree as her male colleagues, Poppy's title came with lower pay and less status. But Poppy persevered. 3 years later, during the historic Apollo 11 mission, she became the first woman to work in mission control. Her job, plan for the worst. As the astronauts circled the moon, they would lose communication while passing behind it. If their trajectory was even slightly off, disaster was inevitable. Poppy ran numerous calculations to ensure that the astronauts came back home. When the astronauts reappeared right on schedule, Poppy's job was done, and it was flawless. An LA Times article titled "The Women Who Helped Put Men on the Moon" stated that while she was focused on ensuring the safety of the mission, her colleagues focused on her, with a camera trained on her every move. America may have won the space race, but the race for equality would take much longer. Eventually, Poppy herself would take up the fight, switching careers to serve as a lawyer for the women's rights movement. On the day the world stood still, Houston was in motion, doing the job they trained for since Sputnik's first beep. At Mission Control, Poppy Northcutt and her colleagues guided every step, ensuring a safe journey from launch to retrieval. The New York Times declared, "Men walk on moon" on July 21st, 1969. Mission accomplished. Rocket STEM magazine notes that it took over 400,000 NASA workers, from seamstresses to engineers like Northcutt and Lee to the astronauts, to make the impossible real. Thanks to their efforts, the first lap of the space race was over, leaving America in the lead. After the historic Apollo 11 moon landing, NASA continued to break barriers in space exploration. NASA's website gives us a timeline. The 1970s saw the beginning of the Space Shuttle program, with the first shuttle, Columbia, ushering in a new era of reusable spacecraft. In the 1990s, NASA launched the Hubble Space Telescope. In the 2000s, NASA expanded its reach with the International Space Station. Today, NASA sets its sights on Mars, with the Johnson Space Center still at the heart of its space program. From the first beep of Sputnik to humanity's first steps on the moon, we can see how Texas played a pivotal role in shaping the course of NASA's history. How the visionaries, innovators, and pioneers who called this place home didn't just see history unfold, they made it. Houston became a place where minds like Dorothy Lee and Poppy Northcutt ensured that even in the face of tragedy, the flame of hope and progress never dimmed. As we venture further into space, reaching towards Mars and beyond, we must remember the history that got us here. That this land of resilience and bold ambition is where we create one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind.